TSU is faced with an interesting test this weekend against Alcorn. Can they do what they haven't done all year and defeat a solid team? Oh, yeah. It's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com, and if you're new, you'll get $150 back in bonus bets if you put down a $5 bet that wins. Go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. This is all about our games of the week that are not our premier game of the week. We'll wrap it up with a couple of Division II schools. We're going to change pace, I know. This is not typically what we do, but this is the last week of Division II HBCU football. So let's break down some critical games that lead to the championship matchup. We'll do that in the SIAC to wrap up the show. We'll do it in the CIAA in the middle of the show, but we kick it off with a little bit of FCS, a little bit of SWAC action, and that is Alcorn versus Texas Southern. It's an interesting game to me because allow me to approach this as an alumni for a minute. I like to get my biases out the way anytime that they're going to come up. I am hoping for a desired outcome, but I believe that everybody should be looking at this game for a specific reason, and that is, can Texas Southern beat a solid team? Obviously, I want the answer to be yes, so I have a vested interest in the outcome of my question. But the question itself is something that's very interesting because when I view TSU this year, they are like the definition of middle of the pack. I don't think this year they've beaten a team that's solid. I don't know if they lost to a team that isn't solid. When you just go through it, and I'm talking about their losses in conference and their wins, period. Right now, maybe if you would have beat Lamar when they were a top 25 team, this will be a different conversation. But there's two critical points here that lead to this talking point. And that's the fact that you didn't beat Southern, and that's the fact that you didn't beat Lamar when you had the chance to. I don't know if many were expecting you to beat Lamar, but when the opportunity presented itself, you had the same, actually, it was very similar of result. You folded at the end. You folded at the end. We allowed you to fold against a top 25 team. At least I did. And I still came on and said, hey, that was a valiant effort. That was something that was impressive. I praised that game. Versus Southern, there's no praising. But now that I'm thinking about them together, oh, maybe this is a repeated affair. But those are your two opportunities to beat solid football teams. Let's look at the 3 wins that TSU has this year. Because I'm on the fence on where I think that Alcorn is. I think they're a solid football team. They're definitely not great, but I think that beating them would easily be the best win of the Chris Dishman era. The biggest, not the biggest, I don't know if it's the best, but it'd be the best team that you've beaten. Let's say it that way. And the reason I have to use this little semantics and whatnot is because back to what I was saying we were going to do. The 3 wins that TSU has this year is over Grambling, PV, and Virginia Lynchburg. That PV game will be the biggest game that Dishman won as a freshman or a rookie head coach. It will be the best game that he wins, in my opinion. If you beat Alcorn, it'll still be the biggest and best game, that PV matchup, but it will not be the best team that you've faced, right? And the thing about PV is I throw records out the window when you have a rivalry game. That suddenly doesn't matter anymore. When you have a rivalry game, I don't care who's good and I don't care who's bad. All of that is done for. Not even a conversation point, seriously. But the way that you dominated, I can't forget that. But you have Grambling. Well, PV, they're at the bottom of the barrel. Grambling at the bottom of the barrel with the division. Like, these are two teams who are at the bottom of the SWAC West. And then your last victory is over Virginia Lynchburg, a team that, quite frankly, you played way too close with. And that actually made me want to puke. Seeing that final score between TSU and Virginia Lynchburg almost killed my freaking homecoming. Right? Like, that was disgusting to me, because you are not supposed to be close with a team like Virginia Lynchburg. No one ever is. So that was very disappointing. Matter of fact, that Virginia Lynchburg game was so disappointing that I took away every single bit of props that I gave them for playing it close with Lamar. It really did, because it spoke more volumes in that L. And maybe that's me being victim to negativity and just feeding into it. But right now, it doesn't feel that way. Right now, it just feels like, this is not the team that I thought they would be. Then their losses. The losses come against FAMU, Jackson State, and Southern in conference. I'm not even going to talk about Rice. I could care less. So, okay, FAMU and Jackson State, I'm not holding that against them, just for the record. I didn't expect you to win that game. I don't know if anybody did. Matter of fact, those are games you should have lost, because you are not up there yet. I know that. I'm not asking for TSU to be an upper echelon team. But that Southern matchup, that's where you could have beat a solid team. That was a winnable game. It was a game that not only was winnable, it's a game that you should have won. And it's something that you are going to regret if you close out the way you wanted to. If you don't, right? Like, let's say that you don't close out the season strong. Well, no one's going to care about that Southern game, because that's not going to be what derailed anything, right? But yeah, so now you're looking at this matchup versus Alcorn, and it's your first opportunity to prove something. And the thing that you have the opportunity to prove is that you can beat a solid team. Is that Grambling? I thought it was, but it doesn't feel like it now. I know it's not PV. I thought it was at the time, but I know it's not now. It's for sure not Virginia Lynchburg. You didn't get Southern, didn't get FAMU, didn't get Jackson State, you didn't get Lamar. This is one of your last opportunities. It really is. And if you beat Alcorn, I'm not even going to go do some revisionist history in a couple of weeks. I will probably count this as a quality victory for you, just to be honest. And this game is also a part of a 3-game equation that could result in the Southern Jaguars clinching the division as early as Saturday. On Monday's episode, I'm throwing some dates out there. On Monday's episode, I spoke about how basically all that needs to happen is Southern needs to win a game somewhere along the rest of their season, and Alcorn needs to lose a game somewhere along the rest of their season. I also articulated that I know it's not that simple. I just am not a believer that UAPB or TSU could catch Southern. Today, we're not just going to basically, if this happens, we're going to give you the exact scenario in which Southern could clinch the SWAC West on Saturday. They have to win, Alcorn has to lose, and UAPB has to lose. If those 3 things happen, then you're looking at Southern as the SWAC West champion with a couple of weeks left. Who would have thought that was going to be the case? Now, as you push forward, these 2 games, or these 2 teams, are coming down to the wire. In the CIAA, Virginia State and Virginia Union are both searching for a spot in the CIAA Championship game, and they have to go through each other this weekend. Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn a very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here. With Robinhood Gold, sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rate may change, and gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, and that's what it is today. Bengals, Ravens, This is going to be a fantastic game. If you think you know what Lamar is going to do, or Zay Flowers is going to do, or Joe Burrows is going to do, or Jamar Chase is going to do, or Derrick Henry is going to do, these are great players, and I think it's going to be a real unpredictable matchup. But if you think you can predict it, you go ahead and go to FanDuel.com. Now, if you're new to FanDuel, you go ahead and put down $5 and you win, you'll get $150 back in bonus bet. So that's just a little bit of extra incentive to make sure you put down a smart bet. Go to FanDuel.com for the NBA, for the ML, or excuse me, for the NHL, for the NFL, whether you're talking about teams, whether you're talking about players, whether you're talking about before the game or after the game, mid-game, excuse me. Everything is there. You go ahead and go to FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. And if you're new to FanDuel, get that $150 back in bonus bets with your win on a $5 bet. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked on LSU. I checked out a very interesting episode because if you're a fan of recruiting, you'll know a lot of things going on with the top quarterback in the country, Bryce Underwood. It's between the Wolverines and LSU, or at least that's who's trying to bid for them. It seems like LSU's in the lead, but you go ahead and check that out with Matt Moscona. Now, Virginia Union versus Virginia State is a game that, even if you take the rivalry aspect out of it, it's an absolutely fascinating game. Even if you take the stakes at hand out of it, right? Let's say that this was Union Virginia versus State Virginia. I don't know, just throwing stupid stuff out there. But say that these were two random teams facing off on week 5 of the CIAA season. This would still be a must-watch game. You can strip the names from it. You can strip the rivalry from it. You can strip the stakes at hand because these two teams are playing for an opportunity to make it into the CIAA Championship game. The winner is in. The loser would need some help if it is Virginia Union. If Virginia Union were to lose, they could still win or make it into the conference championship. But strip all of those things away, and you still have a game between the two top scoring offenses and scoring defenses in the conference. Let's look at Virginia Union. Virginia Union is first in scoring defense. Excuse me. Virginia Union is first in scoring offense and second in scoring defense. Virginia State is second in scoring offense and first in scoring defense. So you're looking at the two top teams on both of this. So you're looking at great defenses, great offenses. If we're just exploring the numbers, the gap between scoring offense is way wider than the gap between scoring defenses, right? Scoring defense is less than a point. They basically give up the same amount of points. They're both going to give up 13 points a game. Offensively, Union's in the 40s. They drop points, okay? And that's not to say that State doesn't, but they're in the 30s. It is a gap, a noticeable gap. So if we're going to talk about the best scoring offense, let's jump straight to Jada Byers, because if you're a coach and you're not game planning for Jada Byers, you can't even coach Little League, right? Like, you don't deserve to coach football or anything. Matter of fact, don't even play Madden where you got to pick your own plays. Tell them to pick the plays for you, because that's not your cup of tea. That's not your strong suit. But Jada Byers is a dog. He leads the CIAA in yards by nearly double, right? Like, it's not even close between him and the next guy as far as productivity goes. 22 rushing touchdowns on the season. That's a career high. And in his career, let's look at what he's been able to do to Virginia State. So in his first game, mind you, Byers is a four-year, contributor. I'm not sure if he started immediately, but he certainly put up numbers like he was starting. So I would think he was. But 4-year contributor. In his first game against Virginia State, 21 carries, 112 yards, 2 touchdowns. Second game, 26 carries, 132 yards, and 1 touchdown. Then in the last game he played, he had 27 carries, 155 yards, and a receiving touchdown. So no rushing touchdowns in that last game against Virginia State. But this is what he does, man. And it's funny because 112, 132, those feel like modest numbers for him. Those feel like modest numbers for Jada Byers. But that's a really good game against somebody. 112 and 2 touchdowns on just 21 carries. You're already at 5 carries 5 yards a carry each time, at least, right? In his first game, it's 6 a pop. On his second game, it's 6 a pop again, or almost 6 a pop. So 5+ every single game. Virginia State is the second best run defense, specifically. Second best run defense. Byers averages 154 yards per game. Not talking about against Virginia State, but just in general. He averages 154 yards per game, while Virginia State only allows 114. So I think that this will be a really good battle. Mind you, when Byers faced Johnson C. Smith, who is the best run defense, once again, that margin is a pretty good margin. When that happened, he got shut down. So we'll see if the second best run defense has the same amount of success that the first run defense, or the best. I ain't gonna say it. First best sounds pretty bad. First best, the best run defense. First place. That's probably the word I was looking for. First place. I almost messed up and said first best. I would have sounded like an idiot to you guys. But anyway, Virginia State, they have a pretty efficient and explosive offensive attack when you're looking at Romelo Williams, who's second in yards per game and touchdowns. And they have the second best pass, or excuse me, Union has the second best pass defense. We're really getting in our stat bag today. But this last 6-game stretch that Williams has been on has been incredible. It's been insane. And outside of that Johnson C. Smith game, which you can tell, they just give people fits, right? That's just Byers gets locked down. Williams has less than his typical yards per game over this stretch. But basically, since late September, Romelo Williams has been a consistent 202 touchdown a game guy every single week. And I'm not just saying 200 is the bar or where he gets to every week. It done been up to 290, 260, you know, had 230. But he's going to give you 200 passing yards, He's going to give you 200 passing yards, and he's going to give you 2 touchdowns of some capacity. Might have a rushing one thrown in there, might be all passing, right? But he's not only that, he's explosive with his arm. He's hovering. If he's not passing 20 yards per game, per completion, if Romelo Williams is not hitting 20 yards per completion, he's flirting with it every single game. Every single game. And to me, that is a huge number that tells you this is an explosive offense. For example, last week he had 12 completions for 212 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then he nabbed another one on the ground. So you're looking at, and that was only his only carry of the day. So let's just say 13 touches don't make sense, but 12 completions, 212 yards. That's almost 20 a pop. He's not doing this with a lot of completions. That's the most impressive thing to me. So overall, this is a great battle of strengths. Virginia State versus Virginia Union, if you want to sum it up to why this is so interesting, and it has nothing to do with the stakes at hand. Yes, the winner will go to the CIAA Championship game. It has nothing to do with the rivalry that is Virginia Union versus Virginia State. You can strip the names away. You can strip the stakes away. But one thing you can't take away is that this is 2 of the best offenses going against each other who has 2 of the best defenses. That's one thing that doesn't change. One thing you can't change, that Union has the best offense and the second best defense point total wise, and Virginia State has the best defense and the second best offense if you're talking about point totals. This is going to be a great matchup, a battle of strengths. Now to the other side of Division II HBCU football, and I'm looking at the SIAC because it's a big mashup and it's a lot of games we have to preview. So let's do that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Hims. And listen, I completely understand how the confidence can be shaken outside of the bedroom if everything isn't performing right within the bedroom, So you might feel like, I can't go. I don't have time to get a doctor's appointment and get my ED treated. That's why Hims makes it simple for you. Hims makes it to where you can have your erectile dysfunction treated without ever having to leave the comfort of your house. Hims is changing healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your own couch. And they're going to provide a range of doctor trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and the generics for up to 95% cheaper. All you have to do is start your free online visit today at hims.com/locked on. That's HIMS.com/locked on for your personalized ED treatment options. Hims.com/locked on. You go ahead and go there today and take care of your business. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Earlier in the week, we discussed a CIAA mashup, right? It's only 2 games for them. It's 3 teams. Oh, how light when you compare them to the SIAC. But you had Johnson C. Smith, you have Virginia Union and Virginia State. I was able to boil that down into one game on today's episode, and that is Union versus Virginia State. I'm not doing that with the SIC. With the SIAC, there's too many games for me to boil it down. They're all equally important, but what I will do is I'll tell you everything that you need to know to understand how a team could clinch a spot in the SIAC. There's 2 front runners in this conference to be a part of the conference championship game, and that's Miles and Fort Valley State. They are the only 2 teams that control their own destiny. Everybody else needs some help. Miles, matter of fact, is already locked in. Miles has the only undefeated record in the conference. No matter what happens, they can't be out because Fort Valley State is the only one-loss team. So let's say that Miles does lose this week. They're going to be a one-loss team. No one else. There's 2 of them. It's going to be the 2 teams in the conference championship game. But let's get into the games, because if I call your name, please come to the front and understand that you are a real player in this conference. Miles, Fort Valley State, Clark Atlanta, Albany State, and then Tuskegee. Those are the 5 people who could be in the SIAC championship game in just a matter of I think a week. So not that it matters, but if Miles were to tie with Fort Valley State, they're the one loss that Fort Valley has. So they would still win that tiebreaker. But let's get into the aspects of how you win this, or excuse me, not how you win this, but how you get your way into the SIAC championship game. There's 3 games you have to watch. Miles versus Tuskegee, so that's 1 versus 5. You have Fort Valley State versus Albany State, so that's 2 versus 4. And then you have Clark Atlanta versus Morehouse, which is just 3 versus a team that has 1 conference victory. This is exhausting. But Fort Valley is the only team, Miles and Fort Valley, the only 2 teams who control their own destiny. If they win, they're in. So outside of that, let's now look at, and if Fort Valley loses, they're done, right? Because they would lose the head-to-head to Albany State. The Albany State, Clark Atlanta, and then also, Albany State, Clark Atlanta, and Tuskegee. Those 3 teams have 2 losses. I'm just letting you know, if Fort Valley loses, they're out. There's no, they lose and something else happens, they are done for. They lost to Albany State in this situation, and that'll be enough to eliminate the head-to-head. For Clark Atlanta, they have the simplest help. All they have to do is win and Fort Valley lose, because then they would have the conference championship berth through a 3-way tie in which Clark Atlanta has the head-to-head victory over Fort Valley State, and then they would beat Albany State because they've beaten better teams, which means they would have the higher combined SIAC opponent win percentage. In other words, they have beaten the better teams. That's simple. On to Albany. They need to win the game. Everybody needs to win. I'm not going to keep saying they need to win. Albany State would be in the SIAC championship game if Tuskegee loses and Clark Atlanta loses. So they can't really win too many tiebreakers. They don't win any tiebreakers with that, right? So basically, they need to win and then only be tied with Fort Valley State. That's, at the end of the day, that's what it is. They also have the opportunity, if they win against Fort Valley State, if Clark loses, if Tuskegee wins, and then Allen needs to win. So if Tuskegee wins, Allen needs to win in order for Albany State to get in. I'm not going to go through all of the tiebreakers because that's too much in my opinion. Then lastly, Tuskegee gets in if they win. Something I said I wasn't going to say, but if they win, Fort Valley State loses, Clark loses, and Allen loses. So they need a lot of help. And then also, if Tuskegee beats Miles, Fort Valley State loses, Clark Atlanta loses, and Edward Water loses, they would also be able to get into the championship game if I'm reading this on the spot. That doesn't make sense. The team ranked highest in the regional. Oh, if they end up being ranked higher in the regional rankings. So basically, if that's too much guesswork. That I can't predict that. I'm gonna stick with the first one. Miles, they need to beat Miles. Fort Valley State needs to lose. Clark Atlanta needs to lose, and Allen needs to lose. So that is your situations. It's a big week in Division II football. We will come on and break that down either Monday or Tuesday. So you'll hear that. You'll hear that, and they'll probably come back and have they'll probably be a part of our extra games to watch on Thursday next week. The CIAA and SIAC championships will probably earn their spot right there. I know two games that I'll be looking forward to next week, so I know what the game of the week options are. It's two of them. I'm not going to tell you what they are because I don't want to jinx it. But in the meantime, in between time, tomorrow we'll have South Carolina State versus Howard. In the meantime, in between time, so next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed, peace.